Informational, Commission General Regulation 375, Apprentice License, LCB file number R019-10. Maureen?
Good morning. Maureen Hullinger, Nevada Department of Wildlife. I'm here to present, like Chairman said, CGR 375, LCB R019-10 for the apprentice license. We've had support material out that went with the language. I think I'll just go ahead and dive right into the language changes to address that. Sections 2, 3, and 4 are definitions that were identified in statute and followed up in this regulation. Section 5, subsection 1, is language regarding the proof of identity the license agent may require. And this is standard language we've used in other locations and regulation. Section 5, subsection 2, identifies what shall be correctly captured on the original and copies of the license that's issued. And here we do have a language update that was identified by systems consultants as necessary, because what we do issue from our NWDS system and what we issue manually, what's on the document, are two different things, because we capture a lot more information on the manually issued license so that we can get it into the system. So we wanted to identify those differences in the language on subsection 2 there. Section 5, subsection 3, this is the language specifying that the license will contain a statement the applicant must sign acknowledging their eligibility. I don't know, you'll see that standard statement at the bottom of all the licenses we issue. Section 6 is language to allow for the temporary license if issued electronically. So if the person obtains this apprentice license through our online consumer site, they're going to get a temporary like they do now for some of our other licenses. So that language covers that option for our clients. Let's see. Section 7 identifies the requirements for the Mentor affidavit application form. We have a language update on that. Let's see, I got ahead of myself here. We're going to requesting to remove section E because it's not required if they're applying for that from home, that form that identifies who they're apprenticing in the field. We don't know who the agent is because they're doing it from home. So there is no agent involved, there's no clerk involved, and then it just changes the letter on the next item. So Section 8 identifies the valid period for the mentor affidavit. Section 9 identifies the requirement that a mentor may only supervise one apprentice in the field and that the mentor must carry the affidavit for the apprentice while in the field. It also identifies that the apprentice may only be supervised by one mentor in the field, maintaining a 1-to-1 ratio. Section 10 is housekeeping that LCB puts in to cover some of the other language. And sections 11 and 12 are also housekeeping by LCB to identify exceptions regarding the apprentice license and other NAC. Implementation, we're going to initially implement manually and then eventually get it programmed into NWDS. We have some other priorities, but we're going to have this implemented this fall, at least manually. And then the fiscal note is $60,800, so $68,800. I'd like to point out that we had support from Eureka, White Pine, Washoe, Elko, and Lincoln. Washoe County did have a recommendation for Section 9, Paragraph 3. They would like to allow for more than one mentor to supervise an apprentice. I'd have to defer to council statute. The way it reads right now, it says it's unlawful for an apprentice to hunt in this state unless a hunter accompanies and directly supervises. I don't know if that means they're only allowed one or if that means that it's at least one. So if you do decide to entertain more than one mentor, if it goes to LCB, there is the potential they could kick it out and just leave it on the singular, but I'm not sure how to interpret the statute as singular or at least one. So, and that's the workshop.
I have a question. Where's the $68,000 going to come from to reprogram this?
Actually, we have already, in our contract from the fiscal note from the legislative session, when we amended the contract at that time to include that amount, it was $59,000 at that time. When we identified more the detail of what it was going to entail, we requested systems consultants to look at their evaluation, and it came out to be $1,800 more. So we've already got $59,000 in there, but we also have contingency funds in the contract to also help cover. So it's built in.
Where'd you get that again? You sort of lost it. Where did you get the money then?
It's built into the contract as part of.
No, I think is what he's asking. It comes from the $10 application fee pool of money.
Sorry.
There's over, $1 million in that account?
Yeah, in excess.
And we use that for all of the modifications to the drawing system and whatnot.
Contracts.
That was changed at the legislature, was it?
All it did was allow us to fully utilize it to pay for costs associated with the draw. So that meant if we had staff dedicated working on the draw, we could charge their salaries to that. Before it was very narrowly defined. So it still has to do with the draw.
It was always, the money was always there available for reprogramming certain parts, but it just expanded it to include some staff time then, right?
Correct. For selling, to anything to do with the licensing part of the program. You want to go any further, Patrick?
Well, it opened it up for the business processes of the department, the app system, and WDS, and staff time associated with those.
Anybody have any questions of Maureen on this, Commissioner Rain?
I have a question. Maybe I don't know if it's more appropriate for council to answer it, but what level of penalty might be imposed upon mentors for failing to follow this NAC? I'm just wondering, there appears to be a liability that would be, by being a mentor, you are taking on some liability. And I'm just, I'm thinking we might end up hearing an appeal from somebody if we have some penalty upon them, trying to help out this kid and I messed up. Where are we at? What is the liability that is?
I'd have to I didn't look at the regulation from that angle. As far as like losing their hunting license for mistakes that the apprentice makes, is that what you meant?
Well, or
they're failure to supervise?
I swear, is by doing this, it seems that they are taking it upon themselves that they will mentor this hunter if they're not there, they don't follow through, the apprentice is out on their own. It seemed like there might be a whole ball of worms showing up there. The apprentice was out without the mentor.
I'll have to get back to you on that.
What's happening? Sure. With it? I'm just thinking about our last appeal, we could have somebody in here. I was trying to help him out, and he got out of school early one day and went out, and we could have. What are the implications of this?
Or who's responsible if he shoots over limited ducks or something like that?
Yeah, and if there is two registered mentors for one person, and neither one of them is present, well, whose responsibility was it? There seems to be a lot of implications.
It's a complex answer, but I guess the bottom line is for this board, all you have jurisdiction over is the guy's license to hunt. So as far as negligence type issues, those go to the courts. Criminal type issues, those go to the courts. So, but the bottom line is I haven't researched it from that angle. I'd have to look at it and get back.
We'll have an answer tomorrow.
Okay, maybe we'll have an answer. I'm just worried about that. If there's a way we could make this language so that there's less implications.
Commissioner Capero.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Basically, the law allowing for the apprentice license situation was passed by the legislature.
Mm-hmm.
All we're doing here is to adopt the regulations to implement it. So it's not a question of whether or not we agree with the process or not. Number two, the question about if a mentor, my interpretation is that it's at least one. And I believe that you could have two or three. It was never anticipated that you'd have two or three people hunting with one single person. But I think the way the statute is written, and I remember it fairly well, is that that would allow for more than one mentor.
I think the question was the other way. Could one mentor have more than one apprentice?
No, I think it was,
No, it's,
the way I described it.
yeah, Washoe County would like to see it more than one mentor with an apprentice in the field, so.
Also, I would point out, and I don't know, Maureen, did you mention that also supporting it was the Nevada Conservation League?
I did not, and I do have that letter
You
here.
have a letter in your packet from Kyle Davis with the Nevada Conservation League supporting the apprentice program.
I'm going to open up for public comment. Anybody in the public want to comment on this?
Morning, members of the commission. Thomas Wilson, Washoe County Advisory Board. We're in favor of this, and the reason for the amendment that we added. Section 9, subsection 1 says specifically that a mentor can only have one apprentice at a time, and that makes perfect sense because you don't want the mentor's attention to be drawn between more than one apprentice. But it's Section 3 that gave us a little concern. Section 3, the way it's written, says that an apprentice may only be accompanied and supervised by one mentor. And here's the issue. Obviously, you guys know me. I do a fair amount of bird hunting. The apprentice program is not for big game. It's for birds. And I suppose it could be for rabbits as well. But it's specifically for upland birds, or generally for upland birds and waterfowl. This is probably the most dangerous type of hunting that we've got because we're talking about snapshots. We're talking about birds diving into the decoys. We're talking about chucker getting up from cover where a quick decision has to be made. That's why it's a little bit iffy because it's a potentially dangerous situation right at the beginning. If we were to go with Section 9, Paragraph 3 as written, where only one mentor and accompanies one apprentice, picture yourself in the duck blind. Ducks come in, shots go off, we got some ducks that are down. Who's going to have the dog? Well, it's going to be the mentor, because the apprentice, by definition, has never done this before. He's not going to have the dog, he's not going to have the decoys, he's not going to have the gear. So who's going to go work with the dog to go get the duck? It's going to be the mentor. Who's going to be left in the blind because, you know, he's 12-year-old and doesn't want to go mucking through the swamp? Well, the apprentice is going to be left at the blind. Apprentice has to put the gun down. And you could see a potential problem while the dog owner's out working with the dog and getting the birds, and the birds come in while the apprentice is sitting there by himself. Many times when I take kids out into the marsh, it's not just myself and a kid. It's myself and a kid and another adult. Well, why can't there be two mentors? I'll work my dog and we'll go get the ducks, and there'll be another mentor there sitting with the apprentice. If the birds come in, the other mentor can be close enough to grab the shotgun or something like that if cases happen. So for safety's sake, it makes a lot of sense to be able to have more than one mentor per apprentice, but still require that a mentor can only have one apprentice. So you can sort of have your cake and eat it too. That's why we recommended the changes. And I concur completely with the way the statute's written. Section 4, it's unlawful for an apprentice hunter in this state to hunt in this state unless a mentor hunter accompanies him. I think that's, got to have at least one. And I don't think it's, written specifically that it can be only one, and I think it would probably be bad public policy if it would be only one, because safety mandates that you sometimes hunt with more than one person. That's our recommendation.
Thank you. Anybody from the public want to? If not, I'll. Commissioner Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The mentor program and the apprentice hunter requires two signatures: the specific mentor and the apprentice hunter. I don't see any problem with a guy taking his buddy along to help out, but you have a responsibility. You have one person that is responsible, and it seems to me like that's the way it should be. One guy is responsible. If he wants to send his buddy to go get the ducks or work with the dog, whatever, one person is responsible. You can't have three people responsible, because then who's responsible?
Well, this is informational only, so we'll be hearing again tomorrow. Commissioner Rain?
Hey, Mr. Chair, just, Mr. Bonici, do you have anything on my concerns about the liability issues? I mean, it's not necessarily, and I completely agree with what Mr. Capurro was saying earlier about it. I mean, we're just trying to narrow down the regulation. But I just want to make sure it's out in the public that, hey, when you are a mentor, what should you expect? What are the penalties that may be applied to you? I just want to make sure that's publicly stated, and we're good.
For the record, Rob Bonamici, Chief Game Warden. There's a couple, well, there's going to be a multitude of scenarios out there, and we're going to have to deal with them on a case-by-case basis. But, you know, scenario one, the apprentice is out there hunting without a mentor. And, you know, that one, if there is no mentor on record, you know, apprentice gets the ticket, type, so to speak. If there is a mentor out there on record, but the mentor's not in the field, then you come down to little investigations required. Is it an aiding and abetting situation? Did they collaborate and say, hey, you know, Rob, go get the mentor's license, form, fill that out and all that, but I'll go by myself if that's okay with you, just so I got somebody on record and I can say you were in the next canyon over or something. So we got to look at all those situations. And then from a liability standpoint, I'm not a civil attorney, so I'm not going to, you know, say a lot there except for, yeah, potential, you know, anybody can sue for anything. You can have two buddies out hunting and one of them does something that causes the other one to get injured, you know, there could be a civil suit there. So from that perspective, I mean, there's a lot of case-by-case basis here.
So I'm not with my apprentice. What do you do to me? That's,
If you're not with your apprentice.
yeah, I'm
then-
over and I'm drinking beer in the truck. What do you do to me?
Well, then we got to determine what's the intent. Even though intent is not required for misdemeanor citations, we still look at that. And the courts, I mean, to some degree, look at that. So in that situation, we would interview the apprentice, we would interview the mentor, we would determine the facts, the actual facts. Did the mentor have any knowledge that the apprentice was out hunting? If the mentor had no knowledge, it's going to be pretty hard for us to take any legal action against the mentor. I mean, it's not going to happen. We won't win that in court.
But you'd come after me, though. I would
But if
assume.
you're the apprentice, yeah,
Or if I'm the mentor.
if you're the mentor,
No, nothing.
no, not if you had no knowledge that your quote apprentice.
But I knew
was
him.
out hunting.
I'm just back sleeping in the truck, and I know he's out. I left him out hunting.
Then that's a little different
So, I mean,
situation.
there is a penalty that could be applied to the mentor in many circumstances.
Right.
Under this.
Yeah,
Those
and we look,
penalties would include.
a lot of aiding and abetting would be,
Oh, okay.
you know, a good one. You're allowing somebody to hunt under the premises of this license, the authority of this license. That's only valid when the mentor is present. So there's,
Okay.
you know, and we haven't obviously been hit with all the scenarios that'll come up out of this. But there's ways to deal with it. If there's ways to tighten it up, you know, cool.
Just to follow up on
Commissioner
what
McGrath.
Scott is, thank you, Chairman Lynn. Just to follow up on what Commissioner Raines is asking, is there a specific statute that you're going to cite that violation under? In other words, is it in, I'm not seeing it in the regulation or here. In other words, and you talked about aiding and abetting, but what is the specific, you know, what is going to be on the citation? Do we have something that you actually are going to be able to do, or is this just a violation that has no penalty?
In section 4, it is unlawful for an apprentice hunter to hunt in the state unless the mentor hunter accompanies and directly supervises the apprentice hunter at all times during the hunt. During the hunt, the mentor shall ensure that the apprentice hunter safely handles the gun, etc. So, under that, that's what we would use.
Yeah,
Is-
but is there a penalty? I mean, what is the penalty?
The penalty is in NRS, in our wildlife code. Anything that is not specified with a certain penalty, a gross misdemeanor, a felony, what have you, is automatically a misdemeanor.
Okay, and that's, I think, what Scott is going towards. And so there is a mechanism in place.
Yes.
To deal with this violation.
Right.
Get it.
Okay.
Commissioner Burr? Thank you. So Rob, and I think you answered the question, but I just wanted to make sure that if I signed up as a mentor for some kid that lived down the street from me, and in good conscience, and he takes off with a buddy to go hunting, and I have no knowledge of it, you're not going to come after me as long as I had no knowledge that he was doing that.
That's correct. It's the same thing like in forfeiture. If you go out and you and your buddy poach a deer, then that vehicle's subject to forfeiture. If your buddy takes your vehicle without your knowledge and goes out and poaches a deer, that vehicle's not subject to forfeiture because you are an unwitting party to the whole thing.
Commissioner Cavan?
I have a question, and maybe you can answer it, Rob. It's not related to the new language. It's actually old language. It's in section 11 at the bottom of page 4. And we're talking about proving you're a resident so you can get a license. And the last line says, a license or permit issued by the department for a previous year is not acceptable proof of residency. And I was wondering what twist makes that not valid. There must have been something somewhere along the line that it seems like if someone has a resident license, that wouldn't be questioned the next time they go get a license.
Yeah, I need to research that a little more, but off the top of my head, we do have situations where we have people that are transient. They leave the state and they're still trying to claim residency and so forth. But let me look at it a little closer, and get a
Let's have
more
Don
specific.
Sefton answer.
Because this is an issue that's come up. Don Sefton from Systems Consultants. We first had this issue in Arizona about 7 or 8 years ago. We had a guy who had a resident license, had applied year after year after year. He came to the website. We picked up his prior year information, said, here's your residency, update it. He didn't update it. He obtained a resident tag, and one of his buddies said, hey, he's moved to Colorado. He shouldn't have a resident tag. And law enforcement tried to pursue him there, and they said got thrown out of court because they said, well, the system told him he was a resident, and he figured it must be smarter than he was, and so he went with it. So we've since then been asking every time when you go in and you buy a license, even though you're recorded on our files as being a resident, the PCPOS agents ask you, are you a resident? If you go online and buy one through the consumer website, you're asked if you're a resident or not and for how long. And if you go and do it through the counters, you're asked again. We applied this in Nevada. We talked to Rob about it, and I think it's filtered into the regulations subsequent to that. But there's a good reason behind it. It's because there's a court case that was already lost because of it, and we're just trying to be smarter about how we do it. So we ask every time, if you buy a license and you come back 3 days later and do something else, you're going to get asked again, are you a resident, on the chance that it may have changed.
Thank you. Any other questions? If not, this is information. Okay, let's, thank you, Rob, Maureen. Let's go on to the next item of business.
Public